Okay, welcome everybody. Hopefully you guys can see my screen. We're going to get kick started in just a few seconds here. So again, thank you for joining today. We have a great session for you aligned, and we'll be talking about the CIS controls to fortify your public cloud environment. And we're going to talk about other controls as well, but just want to kind of give you a quick overview around CIS specifically, as that's one of the most common one that's used around. And so with that, let me kick it off. So again, my name is Kamran Mahmood. I'm the Director of Product Management for Security and Compliance. And so welcome everybody, and let's get started. So what is the agenda today? Okay, what are we going to learn today? Okay, so first of all, we're going to give you an overview of our security challenges in the cloud in the market. We're going to walk you through that a little bit, and I'm confident that some of those challenges will be aligned with yours as well. What is CIS, Center for Internet Security Controls, and how it applies to cloud, and how we can help us harden the security environment, and how to build a security as code process. So what is this thing called security as code? Why is it needed? And how does it relate to CIS security controls and improving security posture? And we're going to talk about the top 10 CIS best practice controls for cloud security and compliance management. We will go into that quite a bit of detail, so you can walk away with something that you can execute on right away. And then we're probably going to spend about like 3 to 4 minutes on the Cloudnosys Cloud security and compliance platform. We're a company that provides a complete end-to-end security platform to monitor, manage, and track your cloud investments and manage all the security and risk around that with reporting and everything else. So with that, before I get started, I'm just going to do some change here on my screen, so bear with me 1 second as I bring up the console here to make sure everything is running smooth. We should be good to go in just a few seconds. Okay. All right, very well. So with that, let me go ahead and come back to the slides here. Okay, so this is our agenda, and we're going to proceed forward with that. So let's talk about the big picture in a cloud economy. So according to Gartner, there's actually two specific core statements from Gartner. One is that by 2020, 60% of digital businesses will suffer major service failures due to IT security teams' inability to manage digital risk. Okay, so and obviously we're talking about digital businesses. We're talking about businesses that are built on the cloud, or that you have a transactional website where you're drawing revenue from, and that's obviously it's running on the cloud side. So again, same exact thing. There's another one where it says that 90% of all cloud breach will be due to customers' fault in the cloud, and so this customer fault, we're talking about inability to manage and track risks within the cloud environment. And case in point, you've seen all the, everything from Equifax to all the cases that are out there. Now, some are no question are more on the application layer, but predominantly, all of these that you're seeing on your screen today is all on the infrastructure side, specifically Amazon. So things like S3 buckets being open, things like identity access controls or security groups, or multi-factor authentication wasn't turned on, or the security groups were very weak. So because of that, the data was released to the market. So with that breach. Now you must be asking that all these companies have great security teams, and they do. So how are they not able to manage this? Well, we're going to talk about the challenges in the cloud and how security is becoming a great challenge because of lack of visibility and control, because of not setting global policies, because of not paying attention to the compliance regulations and best practices. And that's why you're here today, to learn a little bit about CIS and how all these other areas that we can also address as well, everything from risk management and audit, in terms of understanding, enforcing security rules or guardrails to govern the entire cloud. And then also, how do we prepare compliance documentation to be presented to our end customers when they call in and say, hey, are you SOC 2 compliant? Are you GDPR compliant? So all of that, starts with CIS. Quite a bit of it starts with CIS in the cloud, because CIS benchmarks were built for the cloud to address, many of these areas, not all of them, but it's a starting point. So if you're getting into that journey, that's where you're going to start. Okay, so let's just keep moving. All right. So cloud security and compliance best practices. What are they? If you're running applications in the public cloud, from Amazon, Azure, or Google, they all follow similar principle of shared security model. Okay, and they do have set of best practices that they will tell you to follow, but it's very hard to do, because you read a document and you're going to prepare security policies, but how do you enforce those policies? And specifically, the vendor kind of leaves it up to you to identify what a good policy is. So for example, if you have a policy where the root account needs to be created, okay, a root user account, there's nothing in Amazon or Azure or Google will tell you that, well, if you're creating that as a best practice, you should have multi-factor authentication turned on. Okay, they're just not going to tell you that. Yes, it's recommended, but you can go ahead and create an account and not have MFA turned on. So this is where CIS comes in, that says, okay, best practices, if you're going to have a root account, you need to have multi-factor authentication turned on, and you have to secure your root account this way. And there's other principles as well, which we're going to talk about. So these 4 core areas are the areas where you need to invest your time in to be able to build your best cloud security best practices. And today I'm going to help you by giving you a top 10 as part of your library set that you can get started with. So again, first box is cloud vendors best practices. Yes, definitely should look at that. But they're not as descriptive as CIS, Center for Internet Security Controls. They're called benchmarks for Amazon. They also have benchmark for Azure and Google as well, which tells you, all these set of policies, which I'm going to go into. And then, of course, if you are in a regulated industry, even if you're not, for example, GDPR, if you have customers in Europe, there's privacy policies that you need to follow. And then very soon, the California has passed an act for privacy. So that's also regulation that all of us in the U.S. has to follow as well if we're doing business in the United States. So looking at things like PCI, ISO, HIPAA is important, especially the 2 security frameworks, which is ISO and NIST. You should be looking at very closely. And then of course, you should all be looking at novel ways that people are hacking into public clouds. So you need to keep track of those as well. We at Cloudnosys keep track of all this, and we have built our policy sets around these 4 principles. And our customers are very successful around this. So we're sharing that with you as part of the community giveaway today. So let's talk about CIS, and that's why we're here today. Center for Internet Security, the Center for Internet Security is a nonprofit entity, okay, that was established by a consortium of public organizations, and the goal was to fight against the cyber threats or the digital cyber threats, right? And again, it's a nonprofit, so the work that they do, they actually give back to the community. So a team of folks and companies got together and they built the very first CIS AWS benchmark. Okay, I just brought up AWS as an example, just because it's kind of widely used, but same exact thing is available for Azure. Same thing is available for GCP as well. And the set of controls, some of the controls that you see on the right-hand side are noted. So for example, usage of root accounts or S3 bucket policy changes, all these things that CIS gets very, very descriptive with. And you can actually just Google, say, CIS AWS benchmark. You'll get a link, which is a PDF file about 160 pages. and that has about 54 rules approximately. Well, 44 was the initial version. Now there's about 54 that they added. I guess I need to update my slides. So let's drill down into one of the CIS controls, which is actually a very important one, which is the very first one. It says avoid the use of root account, okay? And it gives you, so this text, it's in that PDF file. It gives a description of what's a root account, and it should be avoided and why, because it gives you unrestricted access to all the resources. What's the rationale behind it, and how you can audit, so you can actually check that. If someone created a root account in your cloud system, you could set up you could program a log metric filter, and then of course you have an alarm attached to it, and then be able to send that to some central environment so someone can take a look at it. So that's the flow, and in order to actually write the code in the which you have to kind of like type this in the CLI or the command line interface of Amazon. You can also do it through APIs as well. Write your own API scripts. But this is a long script that you have to kind of type in, and then you'll get a list of all of your users in your IAM listing, and then it'll be able to show you, which one is a root account and what's going on there. So again, there's a set of analysis you have to do, there's a set of code you have to write, and then there's a set of library you have to maintain. So as you can see, this can become very complex. But let's say if you have to write 50 rules, 100 rules to keep track of your cloud account, not just one cloud account, but you may have multiple cloud accounts within Amazon, and likewise with Azure and Google if you're multi-cloud. The complexity grows very quickly, right? So and then of course you have to have expertise to be able to do this kind of thing. But I'm giving an example of how to create the best security posture in your cloud environment, but it takes significant investment, from expertise standpoint to be able to deliver that. Now there are commercial office tools available in the market that actually has CIS benchmarks, which again, it's a starting point, it's not the end game, which you can invest in. So cloud has velocity, right? It goes fast. And so, we need to be able to ensure that, okay, what's changing, who changed it, and is the change a high risk change, right? And so really humanly, there's no way you can govern or track configurations every day and fix them. And this is where automation comes in. So you need a compliance framework to use as a baseline. You will need to do what is called continuous monitoring, and automations are part of that. And then you also have to feed that into your DevSecOps process to be able to create a great center of excellence from a security standpoint. So the two questions I laid down here, you should be asking this yourself, okay? How do we assess our cloud security posture today? How do we do that? And then how long it takes us to audit our cloud infrastructure for, let's say, compliance, right? So these two check marks, you should ask that yourself and actually write down the process of what it takes to qualify and assure that you have maximum control and you are compliant with specific regulation that you're following. So again, all of this, requires investment into some new tooling process to be able to deliver that. So now the question becomes, okay, well, the old way was, we used to have a SOP, a security operation procedure, and we used to keep track of all of our firewall configurations and new account create and password control, strength, and so on. All that was written down. Well, frankly, as a cloud moves so quickly and it's a self-serve environment, anybody can go in kind of and create something what they want to create. So it's almost next to impossible to open a procedure, read it, and then comply to it. It's just not possible anymore. You could keep it for regulators when they come in, like auditors, but really the new paradigm in cloud is what is called security as code. And this code is running all the time. The most critical security signatures are running like in real time, not even being executed on an hourly basis. So, keep that in mind. So again, you have to convert your documents into scripts to be able to understand what your overall security footprint looks like and the risk looks like in the cloud. So the very first thing you should be asking is that, well, what is running in my cloud right now? So you need to focus on visibility, meaning, okay, what's running? In order to understand what's running, you need to have certain things enabled, like CloudTrail. You need to have config running. You need to have your log metrics running for your CloudWatch events, and you should turn on Guard Duty, which is a very good product that Amazon has built in, and of course other Azure has a security center, and GCP has something similar. So all these tools should be turned on because these are starting point, and again, these are not the end game. And then of course, track everything else around what's going on in your security groups, your ports, your ingress, and peer-to-peer access as well. So that's the first thing that you need to take care of. The second thing is that once you learn all that, then you'll find that there are certain things that are not set up appropriately, and you need to take action. So hopefully you're applying the AWS CIS benchmark principles, and from that you can kind of make a high priority list that we have to make access control a big priority first. Make sure that we're only giving access to those who need access, and second thing is that make sure that no one from the internet can get in through certain ports like RDP ports and those sort of things. So automation becomes very important in being able to run these functions. And then the benefit of the security as code is it's always on, it's always running, it's repeatable, you can audit it, and it's easy to iterate and improve on. And forms of code is anything from CloudFormation templates to Ruby scripts to custom APIs and CLIs, which are part of the CIS framework. So now that you got a flavor of what is CIS, it's really a bunch of controls that are listed in a very programmatic form that you execute in your cloud console, okay, to get an output of what is the posture of my, for example, identity and access management users for root accounts. So I'm going to talk about top 10 core signatures that you should be using in your cloud environment to improve security. So let's go through these top 10, and then you can implement these right away. And all those breaches that you saw, all the fancy logos of all the top companies, if they had these top 10 on, none of those breach would have taken place. I know it's hard to believe. These are just 10 controls that could have stopped 95% of all the breaches that we see right now in the market. Okay, the very first one is it gets into your core thing, IAM, Identity Access Management. And so IAM has a concept of different types of accounts. One of them is called the root account. And so, you want to make sure that your root account has access to everything. It's not restrictive. And you want to make sure that for the administrative tasks, you create users with admin rights using the IAM. And an API key are passed into these credentials by your computer. So normally, you should kind of avoid creating the root account and keep in mind that 1 in every 3 customers have root API access keys enabled. So these access keys for the root API should be disabled, and that's one of the principles of the CIS. The second one is you need to review permissions within the IAM. Now, this rule is kind of set because of PCI and so on, but frankly, in my humble opinion, it's becoming obsolete. It's saying that you should use strong passwords, okay, and you should also, for your third-party applications, do all these permissions are needed. So you have to look at that. And how many people have unrestricted access? You need to cut down on unrestricted access. So that's really what it's about. And strong passwords, okay, but now I think this multi-factor authentication is coming in very heavily. That kind of defeats this strong password process. Enable multi-factor authentication, which I mentioned earlier, is that for any core access in terms of root access or other admin access, you should have multi-factor authentication turned on, and frankly, should be turned on for most users, especially in the root account. And so this process is basically, if the bad guy gets access to your username and password, if he doesn't have the cell phone, he won't be able to authenticate and enter your system. So it's a great way of securing things. So let's talk about security groups. Now, security groups can get very complicated very quickly in all of these cloud systems. Okay, and what does security group is really like a virtual firewall for your instance, and it can control inbound and outbound traffic. So each instance has a subnet in your what is called virtual private cloud, and that could be assigned to different set of security groups. So you have to be careful that make sure that your security groups are tight, and you are managing those, especially port 80 and port 443 open to the internet, and any other internet port should be blocked by default, and you should have web tier and application database layers. So like engineering staff wants to have SSH access to the app tier, they should be using Bayesian network, which I'll talk about a little bit ahead. You should also turn on the WAF, Web Application Firewall. It's a great way of cutting down things like SQL injection and other malicious attacks that's coming in from the web front end. Build a secure AMI. So this is about creating your instance OS in a very tight way and controlled fashion, or hardened controls. You can even actually license CIS hardened images that are available on the AWS marketplace, or you can create your own with those rules on it. It's the same thing. And basically disabling password-only access to hosts, so use SSH keys, and disabling remote root logins. So you have to ask yourself, do we want to allow root access? And you have to ensure that only registered applications and services are enabled. You can actually do all this in the Amazon world, specifically with AMI, and of course other cloud vendors have similar approaches as well. Number 6 is encrypt your data. So encryption is very important, especially meeting compliance regulations in transit and also at rest as well. You should be at TLS 1.3 or higher, especially if you're doing PCI work. You can't use 1.2 anymore. That's been deprecated. And you should use the key management service to encrypt your data on the AWS side. And of course, key management process is available for other cloud vendors as well. Monitor unauthorized access. Now, this requires quite a bit of effort, actually. And this is where most of us do fail because we just can't do this manually anymore or rely on some few folks. You really have to invest in tools and technology to be able to leverage and monitor for unauthorized access. So CloudTrail is kind of designed to record all the API activity, and CloudWatch can send notifications based on configurations, but of course you have to set up those configurations. And SNS, which is Simple Notification Service, can be used to receive the alerts. So again, it requires effort and work, but this is a great area to reduce threats. Use Simple Token Service, or STS, it's known. For most of the third parties, because you can have a cloud where third-party vendors will connect into it to give you some analysis. For example, you have cloud cost management tools that work the same way. Make sure that they're using STS procedure, which is a best practice that's designed by AWS for a third party to connect to your cloud safely. And it's really temporary credentials. And of course, we at Cloudnosys use the same principle to connect to your cloud to analyze the data. Secure your S3 buckets. Can't say enough about that. Most of the breaches that have taken place because people have been very loose with access control on your S3 buckets. And of course, API keys are usually used to open the S3 buckets, so be careful with the API keys as well. And you have to ensure that if you have any PII data or intellectual property data, it is protected, it's encrypted, it's version controlled, and you have a good business continuity management process, on top of that as well. So that's the flow. Number 10, the last one, is about conducting vulnerability assessment. And again, you're going to need tools and capabilities for that. AWS and other vendors have all the logging data, all the metadata, all the configuration data. But to be able to leverage all of that data and remove the noise from all the signals and focus on the high value or high risk capabilities is what you need to focus on by investing in capabilities. So what's next, right? So you got a flavor of, okay, what's CIS? You got a flavor of what kind of top 10 signatures we should be running. You got a flavor of that we need to have more controls. It's actually not about knowing all these controls. It's not even about writing security policies and procedures. In the new world of cloud, as fast as it moves, you need to have automation. I mean, automation is the new norm, and that's the only way that you can drive accountability in your cloud footprint. So keep that in mind. And of course, automation is not for free. Either you have to write it yourself with lots of expertise involved, or that you invest in some new tooling. The new tooling will be required because the old tools don't work in the cloud, and they barely work in terms of where the cloud security vendors out there in the market are just trying to catch up. And of course, there's a lot of startups that are being acquired to fulfill that gap. And of course, we're one of those young companies that are focusing very heavily in this area. So let's talk about what this new tools and technology is all about. And again, I'm only going to spend about 3-4 minutes in this real quick because I want to open it up to Q&A and hopefully address your questions. So Cloudnosys, it's a software company that provides a platform called Cloud which has complete visibility, compliance, and governance for your entire cloud footprint. And we work with AWS, Azure, and very soon GCP as well. We have simplified security controls heavily by taking in best practices from NIST and CIS and so on. And we went through line by line and actually coded all the signatures that are needed to comply to that regulation line item. So we have done the hard work for you. And you can see the screen on the right, which gives you pass-fail on specific set of resources from your cloud environment and put it into business terms. So, we identify, we actually take all the controls and run them through and boil it down, whether they're high, medium, or low. And I'll show you that just a few slides ahead. And we focus on these 3 core areas: visibility, governance, and compliance. And it's everything from asset discovery to configurations and drifts to policy guardrailing, auto enforcement, and of course, all the compliance regulations that we support from NIST, PCI, HIPAA, and so on. And what do these consist of? So, we look at all the fabric, compute, storage, networking, database, logging, and also application services and APIs. Pretty much everything that you have, including IAM, which is not listed here. So we're looking at everything in your cloud footprint and analyzing it for risks and vulnerabilities. Here's a quick UI of that, what this looks like as it drills down. And we generate all the reports for you, very easy to understand, very graphical and very pinpointed. And also we put a map up that shows you all the heat map of where the issues are and how you can fix them quickly. And these are the regulations that we support, which I mentioned, everything from CIS to ISO to SOC 2 GDPR, everything is out there. And you can build your own control sets as well in the platform. So with that, let me open it up to Q&A at this point. And so hopefully you guys enjoyed the presentation, and hopefully we'll have some questions coming in shortly. Okay, I got a question on how do you scan and what do you scan, and how do you maintain security and not look at our private data? So first of all, when we actually initiate the scan, there's something called IAM policy, which says exactly what we can and can't do in your cloud footprint. First of all, is read only, and we're only looking at, we're only looking at the metadata around, what do you call it? All your all your services. So that's the only thing that we're looking at. We're not going into your databases or instances and going into that because we can't, because we don't have security access, and actually we don't need to, because what's important for your, let's say, S3 bucket is checking to see, is it open to public, and if it is, okay, does that meet the business purpose? Okay, and let's say if you have a tag called PII on that S3, we want to make sure that it stays closed and also it's versioned and tracked. So yeah, those are the kind of things that we go through, through that process, and we connect all of that through the APIs. Okay, so question around traffic analysis and finding vulnerabilities or bad IPs. So historically, all of these tools in a market do what is called inline analysis, meaning looking at the traffic that's coming in and analyzing that. We're actually not looking at the traffic. We're looking at your security configurations control, and we're looking at the health of your identity and access management controls. So a very different layer that we operate under, which we call an infrastructure layer. Traffic analysis tool like Splunk and Sumo Logic and all of that. There's tons of them out there. That problem has been solved, and we recommend that you use those tools, for that part of security analysis. Okay, question around how do you do compliance reporting for NIST? And how many control sets do you look at in NIST? So we look at the 800-53 controls, and we look at all the FedRAMP high controls for that, which is a maximum set. NIST is fairly extensive, as you guys know, and we look at all of those controls, and we have built signatures for the Azure and Amazon environment, to actually check all of your instances, your resources, and everything in between, and then be able to grade and tell you whether you're failing those compliances or not. So that's what we do. And we actually generate a report for your CISO or for your auditors, and we also snapshot all the data that we keep track of that from an auditing perspective and also from a trending perspective as well. Yep. So we're doing all of that. Okay, just a question of how do you license your product. So if you go on our website, there's a pricing page that you can look at. Basically, we basically count instances. We're a usage-based licensing model. So we look at things like compute and database. That's all we count. So within the database, let's say for AWS, we only count RDS, DynamoDB, and Elasticsearch. We don't even count S3, even though we're doing significant analysis on the S3 side. So that's our kind of like a high watermark instance count, and based on that, we generate the license fees. And license fees are pretty low, actually, from the competition. So we set it at a reasonably priced at like $5 per instance per month, and that's noted on our website. Question around how long it takes to scan, and what do I need to do to actually scan my environment? It's pretty easy. You can initiate a 14-day trial on our website and securely connect to your cloud in a read-only mode, which takes literally 5 minutes. It's just an IAM user that gets created in your environment, and then with a read-only audit policy, standard read-only audit policy. And you basically go from there. And then you'll be able to scan. So scan can vary anywhere from a few seconds to maybe a couple of minutes, depending on how large the infrastructure is. And as soon as that data is finished scanning, all the analysis is pretty much complete. Okay, all right. I think we're just about over our time. We like to keep it 30, 35 minutes, no more than that, to make it interesting enough so that we won't take too much of your time from the day. And look for the next session that's coming up. The topic hasn't been announced yet, I've been told. They're still looking at it. But if you guys are interested in a specific topic, send us an email at info@cloudnosys.com, and we'll be happy to accommodate that. Again, thank you everybody for joining today, and enjoy.